All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle one of the most influential and, let's be honest, most misunderstood books ever written on conflict, Carl von Clausewitz's On War. So, let's start with a really basic question, but one that's surprisingly hard to answer. What is war? Clausewitz, a Prussian general who saw the Napoleonic Wars up close, spent his entire life trying to figure that out. And he wasn't interested in just writing down battlefield tactics. He wanted to get to the very heart of what conflict is. And right off the bat, he throws a wrench in our expectations. See, for a lot of people, war is like chess, a game of pure logic where the smarter player wins. But Clausewitz says, no way. It's a game of cards. It's all about chance, probability, and yeah, even bluffing. It's a world of total uncertainty where you can only see your own hand and you have to make huge decisions based on what you think your opponent might have. To really get where he's coming from, we need to look beyond the battlefield and into the mind of the man himself and understand what he was trying to do. You see, Clausewitz wasn't trying to write some how-to guide that would be outdated in a few years. He actually said his ambition was to write something that wouldn't be forgotten after 2 or 3 years. He saw other military writers creating manuals that a new cannon or a new rifle would make totally obsolete. He wanted to get at the timeless, universal nature of war. Now, he died before he could finish it, and what he left behind was what he called a mass of conceptions. But inside that mass was a framework that would completely change how we think about war and politics. So how did he pull that off? How did he create something so enduring? Well, he gave us one single, incredibly powerful idea that really acts as the master key to his entire way of thinking. And here it is. This is probably the most famous thing he ever wrote, and honestly, it was a total game changer. What he's saying is that war isn't just a senseless burst of violence that happens when talks break down. Not at all. It is a deliberate, rational tool that a state uses to get what it wants politically. It's just politics with fighting. And he makes this really important distinction, right? He says war has its own grammar, the nuts and bolts of battles, tactics, logistics. But, and this is the key, it doesn't have its own logic, the why you're fighting. That has to come from politics. Always. The second you separate the fighting from the political goal, you're just left with pointless destruction. This leads us to his next big concept, what he called the fascinating trinity. Think of any war as this constant tug of war between 3 forces. First, you've got the raw emotion, the passion and hatred of the people. Second, you have the world of chance and probability, which is where the military lives and operates. And third, you have the pure reason and policy of the government. The genius of this idea is realizing that real war is a dynamic balance of all 3. If any one of them takes over, if it's all just passion or all just military calculation, it's a recipe for disaster. Okay, so you might be thinking, if war is supposed to be this rational tool of politics, why is it always so chaotic and unpredictable? Why is it such a mess in the real world? Well, Clausewitz had an answer for that too. He came up with the concept that anyone who's ever tried to manage a big project or even just assemble some IKEA furniture will understand immediately. He called it friction. Friction is basically all the tiny little things that go wrong and just pile on top of each other. It's the rain that turns a road into mud. It's an intelligence report that's just slightly off. It's orders that get misunderstood down the line. It's the simple fact that soldiers get tired and hungry and scared. All this stuff creates a kind of resistance that makes what looks simple on a map incredibly difficult in reality. And if that wasn't enough, you've got the famous fog of war. Now, the original German phrase is a bit more direct. Imperfect insight into the situation. It just means you never have the full picture. As a commander, you're always staring into a fog, trying to make these massive life-or-death decisions with information that's incomplete, unreliable, and sometimes just plain wrong. So all of this, the politics, the friction, the fog, it creates this huge difference between 2 types of war. You have absolute war on one side. This is like war in theory, a pure philosophical idea where you go all out to crush your enemy in one single blow. But Clausewitz says that never actually happens. In the real world, you have real war, which is always limited by political goals, it's dominated by chance, and it's slowed down by friction. That absolute idea is just a theoretical North Star to help us understand how messy the real thing is. So, in a world that's just filled with friction and fog and pure chance, how does anyone actually win? How can a leader possibly succeed? For Clausewitz, the answer isn't some perfect battle plan or a new piece of technology. Nope. The antidote is all about the human spirit. He called them moral forces. And he really breaks it down into three main things: the unique talents of the commander, the fighting spirit and virtue of the army, and the national spirit of the people. He had this great way of putting it. All the physical stuff, the weapons and supplies, that's just the wooden handle of the sword. These moral forces, that's the noble metal. That's the real polished blade. And right at the very top of that list, the most important thing is what he calls the commander's genius. And we're not talking about being a book-smart scholar here. In fact, he pointed out that the best generals are almost never the ones who are top of their class. It's a whole different kind of intelligence. It's this kind of inner light. It's the rare ability to just cut through all that fog with what he called a swift glance of the mind and instantly see the truth of a situation. It's a mind that doesn't just tolerate danger and uncertainty. It thrives in it. It lets a commander solve problems that, as Napoleon once said, would be a mathematical task for Isaac Newton, but they do it in a flash, on a chaotic battlefield. So, what's the big takeaway here? I think Clausewitz's ultimate lesson is that you can never, ever boil war down to a simple science or a checklist. It is a profoundly human drama, one that's driven by politics, shaped by our passions, and is always, always at the mercy of chance and friction and fog. And that's really why this book is still so important. It teaches us that war is never just a series of random events. It's a dialogue, just carried on by other means. And it forces us to look past the violence and ask the most important question of all: what is actually being said?